I remember the night it all changed. Seattle, downtown, a conference room filled with people who thought they mattered more than me. Donovan, my boss, the man I once admired, leaned back in his chair, smirk on his face, and said words that still echo inside me. "You'll never be good enough." The room laughed. Some tried to hide it, others didn't bother. I sat there, my hands under the table, fingers pressed so hard into my palm I nearly drew blood. I didn't defend myself. I didn't shout. I just stared at the glass of water in front of me and imagined it shattering. That was the night I stopped believing their lies, the night I stopped waiting for validation, and the night I started planning. They thought I was broken. They thought humiliation would crush me. But humiliation is fuel. It burns colder, lasts longer. So I smiled, just enough for them to think I had accepted it. Inside, I was already building the silence that would end them. They took my pride. They took my marriage. They even tried to take my future. But overnight, I would take everything from them. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, stay. Because silence is sharper than anger. And revenge is always patient. Seattle, downtown tower. A room full of polished shoes, glowing screens, and egos stacked higher than the skyline. I sat at the end of the long oak table, notes ready, slides prepared. 10 years of work had led me to this moment. My project, my chance, and then he spoke. Donovan, my boss, the man I once admired, the man who now smiled like a predator. He leaned back in his chair, loosened his tie, and said it. Words sharp enough to cut through every wall I had built. "You'll never be good enough." The room froze, then cracked open with laughter. Some covered their mouths. Others didn't bother. Each laugh hit harder than the last. I didn't answer. I didn't fight back. I just pressed my palms into the table until my knuckles turned white. The glass of water in front of me trembled, catching the fluorescent light. Inside, I shattered. Outside, I stayed still. That's when it happened. The humiliation didn't break me. It sharpened me. I realized I wasn't too small for this room. The room was too shallow for me. I smiled just enough for them to think I'd accepted it. But in that silence, I started planning. My name is Daniel Hayes, 38 years old, a software engineer in Seattle. People said I had a quiet life, but silence is not peace. Sometimes silence is just the sound of being ignored. 10 years. That's how long I gave to Donovan Tech. Late nights, missed birthdays. My daughter once blew out her candles on a cake I wasn't there to cut. I told myself it was for her future, but the truth, it was for their approval. Approval I never got. 2 years ago, my marriage ended. Rachel packed her bags, looked me in the eyes and said, "You're a good man, Daniel, but not good enough." Same words, same knife, different voice. I tried to move on. I buried myself in work. I thought if I built something great enough, loud enough, maybe they'd see me. Maybe she'd see me. But admiration never came. Instead, my ideas were stolen. My loyalty mocked. And I was left with nothing but the silence I had chosen for myself. That silence grew heavier every day. It pressed down on me at night. It followed me in the mornings. Until humiliation turned it into something else. A weapon. The man they thought was broken was still here. Still standing. And he was learning how to sharpen his silence into revenge. Seattle rain has a way of hiding tears. For years I told myself the drizzle on my face wasn't sadness, just weather. I lived in a small apartment near Capitol Hill. 1 bedroom, 1 desk, 1 man trying to prove his worth. My nights were spent staring at code, chasing deadlines that were never mine to own. Neighbors saw me as the quiet one, the man who left early, came home late, lights still glowing past midnight. They didn't know the cost. The missed calls from my daughter, the unopened letters from my parents, the way birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays slipped past me like ghosts. Every sacrifice, I believed, was an investment. I thought one day the company would see me, that maybe Donovan would shake my hand and call me brilliant. But brilliance doesn't exist when it's buried under someone else's name. At times I tried to convince myself it was enough, that providing the backbone of every project, every system, meant something. But every payday, every meeting, every silent dismissal reminded me I wasn't a partner. I was a pawn. The truth is, I'd given them everything. My time, my family, my pride. And in return, they gave me silence. Not the silence of respect, but the silence of being erased. That's when I learned. Sacrifice without recognition is just slavery in a suit. And I was done wearing it. Sacrifice was supposed to mean progress. But in Seattle's glass towers, sacrifice only meant silence. I had spent months designing a framework for Donovan Tech's new AI project. Sleepless nights, coffee that turned cold before I could drink it. Every line of code felt like a piece of me. Fragile, but alive. When the time came to present, I stood ready. Charts, models, prototypes polished until they gleamed. It was my work, my vision. For once I thought maybe they'd see me. But when the lights dimmed and the projector came alive, it wasn't my name on the first slide. It was his, Mark Donovan. He spoke with ease, parading my design as if it had been his all along. Every sentence he spoke felt like another theft, not just of my work, but of my pride. The board applauded, investors smiled, and I sat in the back row, my fists clenched so tightly I left crescents in my palms. No one questioned it. No one even looked at me. To them, I was invisible, just another shadow behind the stage lights. That night, something broke. Not the way they thought, not in despair, but in clarity. If they could steal my work in plain sight, what else had they been stealing behind closed doors? I walked out of that room with nothing except a question. And questions in the right hands are dangerous. Seattle nights carry a different kind of silence. The streets hum with neon, but underneath, there are whispers. I was leaving the Donovan Tech Tower late, my badge still burning in my pocket. That's when I heard my name. Daniel. It was Chris Morales, a former systems analyst. He'd left the company 6 months ago. No warning, no goodbye. Now he stood in the shadows of the parking garage, looking over his shoulder like a man being followed. We talked quietly, voices bouncing off concrete walls. He didn't waste time. They've been covering things up. You want answers? Look at the backup servers, the ones they pretend don't exist. I frowned. And why are you telling me this? Chris's eyes darted to the cameras above us. Because I was like you, loyal, invisible, and they almost ruined me. Don't let them do the same to you. Then he walked away. No handshake, no goodbye, just the echo of footsteps fading into the night. I stood there, staring at the dark exit sign glowing red. Backup servers, hidden files. If Mark Donovan could steal my work in daylight, what was he stealing in the dark? For the first time, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt like an opening, a doorway to truth. And once you hear the whisper of truth, you can't unhear it. I couldn't shake Chris's words. Backup servers, hidden files. The thought followed me through every hallway of Donovan Tech, echoing louder than the hum of fluorescent lights. So I acted, quietly. I started small. A routine check here, a late night login there. To anyone watching, I was just another tired engineer. But in the shadows of code and firewalls, I was digging. Seattle's nights became my camouflage. I stayed long after everyone left, the office empty except for the faint glow of screens. Every keystroke felt like stepping deeper into a locked room. Every password cracked felt like a door creaking open. I copied fragments first, financial ledgers, innocuous emails. Then patterns emerged, transfers, encrypted contracts, shell companies I had never heard of, and all of it tied back to Mark Donovan. Each file I saved to my encrypted drive was another piece of my stolen pride clawed back. For years, I had given him my work. Now I was taking something back. Not recognition, not approval, truth. Still, fear pressed on my chest. If they caught me, I'd be finished. But fear has a way of sharpening focus. I wasn't reckless. I was precise, and precision was my shield. By the time the city lights dimmed to gray, I had enough to know this. What they were hiding wasn't small. It wasn't just stolen ideas. It was something darker. And for the first time in years, my silence felt powerful. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. At first, it looked like sloppy bookkeeping, mistakes in numbers, contracts with vague terms. But mistakes don't repeat with such precision. Buried in the backup servers, I found ledgers no one was meant to see. Millions moving through shell companies with names as empty as their accounts. Transfers routed through Cayman banks. Masked behind strings of code. The kind of transactions you don't find by accident. And every road led back to one signature, Mark Donovan. I stared at the screen, the glow washing over my face in the empty Seattle office. My stomach churned. This wasn't about stolen ideas anymore. This was theft on a scale that could ruin thousands of lives. Customer data sold, contracts rigged, money laundered through fake subsidiaries. I leaned back, heart pounding. For years, I thought my silence made me weak. Now I realized it made me invisible, and invisible men can move freely. Still, the weight of fear pressed against me. If I pushed too far, I'd be exposed. But the files kept pulling me in, each one a nail in the coffin of Donovan Tech's reputation. That night, I copied everything. Every ledger, every transfer, every lie dressed up as business. By dawn, the skyline of Seattle was painted in cold gray light. I looked out the window and whispered to myself, they built this empire on rot, and I'm going to make sure it collapses. Seattle's city lights can be cruel. They shine brightest on the people who least deserve it. It was a Friday night when Donovan Tech threw their annual gala, a parade of polished suits and champagne smiles. I wasn't invited, of course. Invisible men don't get invitations. But I didn't need one. Curiosity carried me to the edge of the ballroom, where glass walls revealed everything inside. And there she was, Rachel, my ex-wife, the woman who once told me I wasn't good enough. Her hand rested on Mark Donovan's arm, fingers curled like they belonged there. He whispered something, and she laughed. A laugh I hadn't heard in years. The same laugh that used to fill our kitchen on Sunday mornings. I froze, not from shock, but from the confirmation of something I'd always feared. It was never about love. It was about status. And Mark had taken everything. My work, my reputation, my marriage. For a moment, rage nearly cracked through my silence. I wanted to storm inside, to rip the mask off their smiles. But rage is loud, and loud gets you caught. So I watched. I memorized the way her diamond earrings glittered under the chandelier, bought with money stolen from lives I hadn't yet counted. I memorized his smirk, the same one from the boardroom. Then I walked away, my jaw clenched, my chest hollow. Their betrayal wasn't just personal, it was fuel. And fuel, when burned slowly, lights the brightest fires. After that night at the gala, something inside me locked into place. I had felt anger before, humiliation, betrayal, but this was different. This was clarity. Mark Donovan thought I was broken. Rachel thought I was weak. They both mistook silence for surrender. They never understood silence can also be strategy. Back in my apartment on Capitol Hill, I stared at the files I'd copied. Each folder was a weapon. Each transfer, each hidden contract. Another bullet in a magazine I was quietly loading. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. Shouting wouldn't bring them down. But evidence could burn them alive without me ever striking a match. So I encrypted everything, packaged it neatly, and sent it off. One copy to a trusted journalist at the Seattle Ledger, another to a federal contact who still owed me a favor. No dramatic speeches, no threats, just attachments with subject lines that read, "For your eyes only." I hit send. And in that moment, the silence around me changed. It wasn't the silence of being erased anymore. It was the silence of precision, of a man who doesn't need recognition, only results. As I shut my laptop, I whispered to myself, they wanted me invisible. So invisible I'll be, until the day they wake up and everything they built is gone. The hardest part of revenge isn't the planning, it's the waiting. Seattle mornings moved slower after I hit send. Coffee shops buzzed with chatter, buses rolled past Pike Street, people carried on like the world was steady. But my world wasn't steady anymore. It was ticking, like a bomb I had already set. Each morning I opened the news, scrolling headlines that weren't yet mine. Each evening I checked my inbox, waiting for a reply that never came. Silence stretched, heavier with every hour. Doubt crept in. What if the files weren't enough? What if the journalist buried the story? What if Mark was too powerful to touch? At night, I lay awake in my apartment, the Seattle rain tapping against the window like a reminder. Patience, patience. Still, patience tastes bitter when revenge is so close you can feel it breathing down your neck. On the 7th day, the company announced a press event, Donovan Tech's grand unveiling of the very project I'd built. The stage was set. The cameras were ready. Mark would be there, smiling, the world at his feet. And me? I would be watching from the shadows, coffee in hand, heartbeat pounding like thunder. Because I knew something he didn't. When the curtain lifted, it wouldn't just reveal his triumph. It would reveal his downfall. The day arrived like any other. Seattle skies gray, rain soft against the glass. But inside the convention center, lights blazed, cameras rolled, and Mark Donovan prepared to crown himself king. I watched from the back row, anonymous among investors and journalists. The stage glowed with Donovan Tech banners. Mark strode out in a tailored suit, the same smug smile he wore the day he stole my work. Today, he declared, we reveal the future. The crowd erupted in applause. I didn't clap. My pulse was steady, like a man counting down seconds. And then, it happened. Not with a bang, but with the sharp crack of reality. Halfway through his speech, the doors burst open. Men in dark jackets swept in, badges raised. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Step aside. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras pivoted, flashing like lightning. Mark froze, his words dying in his throat. For the first time, that smile faltered. 2 agents cuffed him under the spotlight he had prepared for his triumph. The same stage he thought would make him untouchable became the stage of his humiliation. Investors whispered. Journalists shouted questions. And I sat still, hands folded, watching justice play out without saying a word. Mark's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for an answer, for someone to save him. But no one moved, not even Rachel, especially not me. As they dragged him off stage, I leaned back in my chair and thought, you said I'd never be good enough. But tonight, I was more than enough. I was your ending. The headlines came fast. Donovan Tech scandal rocks Seattle. CEO arrested for fraud, data breach. Mark's face was everywhere. TV screens, newspapers, social feeds. The mighty had fallen, and the world was feasting on his downfall. But my name was nowhere. No mention of Daniel Hayes. No whispers about the man who had spent years in the shadows, who had bled for a company that erased him. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I walked through Pike Place Market the next morning, blending into the crowd. Tourists snapped photos. Vendors shouted prices for fresh salmon. The world kept moving. No one knew I was the reason Mark Donovan was in chains. No one knew the files, the evidence. The silence that ended him came from me. It felt strange, watching justice unfold without credit. Part of me longed to step forward, to claim victory, to finally hear the words, you were good enough. But recognition is a leash, and I was done being leashed. Let the journalists speculate. Let Rachel scramble to find her footing in a life built on lies. Let the company claw at the ashes of its empire. Me, I was free. Free from their judgment. Free from their stage. Free in my silence. Sometimes victory isn't about being remembered. It's about making sure they can never forget their defeat. Justice came for Donovan Tech like a tidal wave. Investigations spread wider than even I expected. Executives questioned. Accounts frozen. Shareholders screaming for answers. But through it all, one name never surfaced. Mine. I thought it was luck at first. Then I remembered. 2 years earlier, in the final days of my marriage, Rachel had handed me a document. A waiver. A contract forcing me to sign away every share, every claim to Donovan Tech. She said it was for peace of mind. I signed it without protest. At the time, it felt like defeat, like giving up the last piece of my worth. But now, that signature was my salvation. Because when the feds tore through Donovan Tech's records, my name was absent. No shares, no legal ties, no fingerprints on the rot. I was the ghost in the system, untouchable, invisible, free. I sat in my apartment overlooking Puget Sound, the city lights flickering on the water. For the first time in years, I let myself laugh. Not the laugh of victory, not the laugh of pride, but the laugh of a man who had finally turned his own erasure into power. Rachel thought she had stripped me of everything, but her betrayal had set me free. Her signature had written my immunity. And Mark's downfall was sealed the moment I stopped fighting for recognition. Sometimes the past doesn't haunt you. Sometimes it shields you. And sometimes the very chains they lock on your wrists are the keys that open your cage. Seattle at night is never truly quiet. The ferries hum across Puget Sound. The rain taps against glass. But inside my apartment, silence finally felt different. For years, silence was a cage. It was the sound of being ignored, erased, forgotten. But tonight, it was something else. It was freedom. Mark Donovan was gone. Rachel's glittering world had turned to dust. And Donovan Tech, the empire built on my sacrifice, was in ruins. I should have felt triumph. I should have raised a glass, shouted my victory, demanded recognition. But revenge doesn't taste like champagne. It tastes like steel. Cold, heavy, necessary. I sat by the window, city lights flickering across the water, and I laughed, not out of joy, but out of release. For the first time, the weight was gone. Not because I had been seen, but because I had stopped needing to be. They said I'd never be good enough. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was never meant to fit their measure of worth, but I didn't need their scale anymore. Revenge didn't heal the wounds. The scars are still there, but it stopped the bleeding, and sometimes that's enough. I closed my eyes, let the rain carry the city's noise, and whispered to myself, the silence they gave me became the silence that destroyed them. I've told you my story, but maybe it's not just mine. Maybe you've sat in a room where someone told you that you weren't enough. Maybe you've given years of your life to people who never even said thank you. Maybe, like me, you felt the sting of betrayal by the ones you trusted most. If you have, then you already know. Silence can break you, or it can shape you, and when it shapes you, it becomes sharper than any blade. I didn't need applause. I didn't need headlines. I didn't even need them to say I was good enough. All I needed was for them to lose everything they had stolen from me. And they did, overnight. But this isn't just about me. It's about you. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent? Would you have walked away? Or would you have built the kind of revenge they'd never see coming? Share your story below, because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe your silence could inspire someone else's fire. And if you want more stories like this, true, raw, unpolished, hit subscribe. Not for me, not for numbers, but so you never forget. Justice doesn't always come from the loudest voices. Sometimes it comes from the quietest ones.